Okay, so before we start, I'll do an introduction. So my name is Noemi and I'm from Healer Collective. So Healer Collective assists the top healers, artists, and thought leaders in the wellness industry as they develop and grow their business. So this series of free virtual programming is brought to you by WellSet and Healer Collective. So WellSet is a place to learn, book, and heal, and basically a virtual wellness studio and educational platform, as well as a marketplace to discover and book one-on-one sessions. So today we are so happy. We have here Bowen with us. So he's a coach, writer, and speaker, and he's from San Francisco area. So we're so happy to have you today here. So a little bit about him. Through his second sight coaching practice, he helps others develop and use their intuition, change the structure, habits, move past depression, and overall to choose freedom. So Bowen's highest calling is to tell the truth, both to share his own story honestly and transparently, and to speak what is too rarely spoken. So we are so happy to be here today. Thank you guys for joining us. And also, as we're going through this like hour-long workshop, we will have several opportunities for discussion. So at those times, just please feel free to use the chat feature and raise your hand so we can have like a workshop like much more experimental. So thank you guys, and I'll let Bowen start.
All right. Thanks so much, Noemi. Appreciate the introduction. Great to be here today. Great to see everybody out there in Zoom world. My name is Bowen Dwelle, and I'm here to help, if possible, help you find a little bit more freedom in your life. So today, my goal is to talk specifically about alcohol. I'm going to talk about it in a new way, not like it's a problem, a disease that involves treatment and recovery and all that negative stuff from the last century. Frankly, none of that served me, and I think it's obsolete. I just don't think it's a really relevant point of view for most people. For my part, however, let's not miss the straight fact that alcohol is a toxic substance. And if you make a habit of drinking it, it will drag you down. Maybe a little, maybe a lot, but there really are no two ways about it. It is a downer. And for my part, at some point, not too long ago, it finally became clear to me how much it was dragging me down, and also how much I had been afraid of change. And once I did change, how needless that fear had been, and how long I had needlessly suffered because of that fear. That experience of change is the main thing that inspired me to become a coach. And although I don't only work with people on their relationships with alcohol, it is a big part of my practice. So again, for those of you who are open to it, I would love to see your faces. We'll open up the conversation at various points through the time that we have together. And so it'd be great to see you. Again, thanks for being here. So to begin with, let me ask you something right away using the chat. What brought you here today? Is there something or anything about how you've been living that you wish you could change, but you don't quite know how to change? And we'll have a look at the chat here. Or if someone wants us to answer that verbally, raise your hand and we could hear you speak. Seema, thanks for your comment there in the chat. Yeah, I don't drink a lot objectively, but I have been drinking more than I want to. I hear that all the time, and so frequently, and that I think is far more common than many of us imagine. And that was my story too. Questioning my relationship, right, with alcohol. Um, Not fun anymore. That's a good one too. Not fun anymore. It certainly was fun at some point. I mean, at least for me, it was fun at some point. Um, and sober curious. Yeah, I see a couple of comments too that kind of relate to, I'm not quite sure what Whole30 is, but it sounds like I actually don't know what Well30 is. Maybe someone can tell me. Elimination diet. So you eliminate like other toxins or other things from your diet. Is that what that is? Um, yeah, got it. Okay. Right. Well, that's kind of how I have come to, um, one of the contexts in which that I approach the conversation about alcohol is in a larger context of wellness, right? And when we think about all of the other things that we do to be well, to live well, and how we are conscious of what we eat and drink and put in our bodies and do with our bodies, of course it makes sense to put to think of alcohol in that same context. Um, Yosh, thanks for your comments too. Great to see you here. And I see some other familiar faces. Alana, hi. Great. And I drink, it helps my mind and body rest from being stimulated, but I'm wary of negative effects. So that's a great comment too. Thank you, Jonah. That feeling of rest and relaxation, relief that we often get from drinking. I will talk about that. We'll talk about that some more too. And Kathy, you guys are bringing up some great stuff. The sleep, question of sleep, right? We often find or believe, right, that alcohol helps us sleep, but then it's also true that we don't feel that well rested. So like, how could both be true? They kind of are both true. And yet one ends up being a little bit more true, usually. All right, so let me share just a little bit of story with you, and then we'll discuss some more. Quick story about depression. Maybe you've heard of depression. We've come to think of it as like a thing. It's not a thing. It's not a disease that you can catch. It's a pattern, right? It describes a place, a way where we get into when your normal is like way below normal, right? And not just sometimes, but all the time. You know intellectually that it can change, but in the moment, it doesn't feel that way. And the moment feels like it's going to go on forever. I was really depressed, I mean, to some varying extent, most of my life. And it always sucked. But the worst thing about it, in a way, was that I didn't understand why I was depressed. And this is really pretty common, actually. I don't buy the idea that it's due to a chemical imbalance. I mean, at least not for the huge number of people out there that feel depressed. It's just not possible. There are too many people. In fact, it is true that at some level all along, I knew what I know now, that there is a reason, or many reasons. And what I've come to believe about it is that depression is a symptom of not living well in various ways. But for a long time, I was too depressed to admit that, or to see that, or admit it, or let alone to change much about how I was living. It's definitely a catch-22. Johann Hari's book, Lost Connections, by the way, is great for more truth about depression, if you're interested in that subject in particular. As I got into my 40s, though, I had started to change a lot of things, and I was living way better. And my depression did improve a lot. And by the end of 2017, which is fairly recently, I had changed just about everything in my life. I had sold my business successfully, become a semi-professional athlete. I was doing all sorts of creative and athletic things, living with a beautiful partner. And, we had just spent 2 weeks in Japan, and I was flying to Brazil to work as an adventure guide. So pretty awesome, right? I was feeling good. Life was good. And yet, when I came back from Brazil at the beginning of 2018, I felt this downward slide, this familiar feeling. And I still didn't know why. It really didn't make sense, especially, because by then all these ways that I hadn't been living very well had changed, or so I thought. I mean, there was exercise, I had rewarding work, self-determination, connection, community. So I did what I had always done to pass the time. And after like 3 weeks or so, yeah, I had a bit of a flash. I was sitting there on the couch watching TV, feeling depressed, and I was drinking. And then I thought back to our trip to Japan, and we had been drinking a lot of amazing sake. And I thought back to my other trips, and of course I had been drinking. That was normal for me. Not a ton, as several of you have said, not drinking that much, but it was part of my normal. And I was forced to admit, or I finally saw clearly, that I had been drinking that way since I was 10 years old. And that may be true for some of you too, but it's kind of a shocker to my adult self to tell that truth, that I had been drinking regularly since I was 10, 11 years old. And so it was a very deeply ingrained habit, not a fall down, get fired, broken homeless habit, but the daily, like, I love fine wines and cocktails, very normal sort of habit, with which I'm sure most of us are familiar, right? That's the kind of normal drinking that we like, that many people do. And in that moment, right, because I had really kind of resolved all the other screwed up ways that I had been living, or maybe not all, but a lot of, let's just say, something became clear to me that had never become clear before, which is that drinking had been making me depressed. Right? Not the only thing, but that it was so co-involved all along that I couldn't really pull them apart. And so that it was possible that drinking could have even, caused my depression in the first place. Because, I mean, I was not like a depressed kid just for no reason. And I had been looking for this deeper reason, for my depression, but I had refused to consider the possibility that my normal drinking had anything to do with it. That's what it was, because it was so normal, right? And it wasn't extreme. And in all the therapy that I did, and I have done a lot, nobody asked me about drinking. It turns out that it's a taboo subject, even in psychoanalysis, which is kind of insane. But that's actually true. Ask an analyst. And I mean, although not universally true. And, nobody else asked me either, because it's normal, right? My friends, my parents, lovers, etc. So in that moment, so I had to, come to that realization on my own, is my point. In that moment, once that connection between drinking and my depression became clear, and was corroborated by some reading that I did afterwards, I I just lost the desire to drink. It just kind of went away because depression was something I had spent a lot of time and energy working on. And just to be clear, it's not that all of a sudden I found myself like wanting to stop badly enough, or that I was like finally able to muster up the willpower. No, I just lost interest because I realized that this, awful connection. So, and along with that, I mean, I just want to say, like, the idea that there was some sort of, there's often like this idea that, well, this relief, relaxation, or kind of that alcohol like helps me be more me. Again, that it would give me relief from depression, or just, help me relax. Any of that, the idea that it held any kind of like further promise for me, that was gone. I didn't need to run any more experiments, let's just say, after that point. So, okay, hopefully you're not depressed. That, hopefully that's not your problem too. If it is, well, maybe this has helped a little bit with that too. But my point really is to use that experience of mine to illustrate, I mean, for one, to talk about the connection between depression and alcohol, because it is a very important connection, and because very few people talk about that truthfully and openly, but also to talk about change and how change happens within us. So here's another question for you guys. What is your experience with change within your own life? I mean, have you ever had the experience of changing a long-standing habit of some other, of any sort, of some other sort, of establishing, a new habit, or of changing, either of finding some change occurring within yourself, or of willfully making a major change? I'd love to hear some examples, or description of that experience. Yeah, feel free to use the chat, or raise your hand if you'd like to use audio. Experiences with change. No changes. It's okay. I changed too quickly. Hi, Tish. I see your hand. Here, I can unmute you, I think. There, Tish.
Yeah, I'll
Oh,
just
there you go.
okay. I'll just offer that I had a long stint of like doing triathlons and that sort. So there was just it was kind of, I was really in a rhythm, and so I noticed that change. But I'm in event production, so part of my job is choosing wines and beautiful food, and it's just been it's just been what I've done for a long time. But I too am realizing that, I began drinking in high school, and I never really thought that I've been doing that since high school. But the reality is, to some degree, and sometimes small amounts and sometimes larger amounts. But that's, it's a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear part of what you're saying is just telling the truth,
Right.
about that to yourself and to us too. And that moment for me of telling myself the truth and then starting to tell others, just as a practice. I mean, I think that practice itself is very, very helpful to, if you have a moment where you see something that's true, whatever it might be, that's a message, right, from your intuition, from yourself. And those messages they're never wrong. There's always something there. And And if you see something, especially something that's like, well, geez, I guess it's true. I have been drinking since I was 10. It's kind of a shocker. And it's hard. It's hard to say it out loud, or it was. So I just started doing it, and it became easier to say, and it forced me to realize, like, wow, geez, that's true. I wonder what the impact has been. So thank you, Tish, for that. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So afraid of change. Thanks, Yosh. Let's talk about change a bit more. Fear, right? Fear and change are totally intertwined, and we also, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but we also tend to think that change, it's an old saying, change is hard, I think, right? Change is good, but change is hard, something like that. It's like, relationships, you got to be prepared to do the work. It's one of these Protestant things too. And we also tend to think that habits are established like by force of will, right? Like you make a habit and then you do the thing because you have the habit. But that doesn't make any sense, actually, because habit is just the evidence that you have been doing the thing long enough to grow the meat of your brain to make it a habit. That's what a habit is. Okay, habit, again, is the evidence that you have been doing something long enough to make it a pattern and for it to actually grow into your neuromuscular structure, right? And Mark Lewis writes about this in The Biology of Desire. The way we experience things shapes our biological matter, right? That's the meat of the brain. And those biological changes shape the way we experience things subsequently. Desire-laced experiences, in particular, mold the brain into a vehicle for creating similar experiences. The short way to say it is you get good at what you do, right? And our neurobiology supports that. The thing is that in the modern world, this natural learning process, and that's what a habit is simply learning, right? Our body's learning to do something better and better, really. That process is easily hijacked by things that skew things that come from outside of our biology, right? So substances like alcohol, but also behavioral inputs, right? Porn, games, gambling, scrolling, apps, lots of things that exaggerate our natural neurochemical cycle. They make it more extreme, right? Because our natural neurochemical cycle is like this. It's like the waves in the ocean. It's like the bends in a river. It's not jagged. But what happens when it's exaggerated by substances and other things is that it gets super extreme, and also it gets pushed downwards. It gets pushed downwards, and that's part of why depression is so often associated with these behaviors. And alcohol, just by the way, to go back to alcohol, it does that to everyone. That's how it works. That's just part of the that's the neurochemistry of what a substance like what alcohol does. It's not like there are some people that are immune to that effect. We're all subject to neurochemical effects and things that vary in degrees, but that effect is there, absolutely. And yes, someone's asking about books, and yes, I will provide a reading list at the end. So Change. So alcohol kind of helps to get us stuck, is part of my point about alcohol and change in particular, is that it gets us stuck, and we get a habit established. The habit gets exaggerated by the substance. It does get wired in, as all habits do, but it's still just that. And point being that it helps to understand how it works, right? There's not like a mystery of some, disease that you might have that just makes you like hopelessly subject to the effects of this mystery substance, right? That's what I'm trying to do here in this little section, is demystify that. That's not it. There's no mystery, right? It's neurochemistry. You can learn how it works, and it helps a lot. The other thing about change is that our behavior is driven by our beliefs. Okay. And it becomes automatic, sort of semi-automatic through habits, but it's often the case that behavior is driven by our beliefs. And it's often the case that what we believe is something that we came up with a long time ago, right? A long time ago. Here it is, prehistory. And that belief may well no longer be true, but we're still just running with it automatically. And our behavior still reflects that belief because it's been wired into our neurochemistry. As my fellow coach, Robert Ellis, puts it, in acting on these beliefs from the past, we are being the solution to a problem that no longer exists, right? We came up with that belief sometime in the past, and we're still acting on it. So sometimes getting unstuck and moving on, changing, is as simple as re-examining what that core belief is in the light of the present, okay, and even in the light of the future, and seeing if it still serves us, seeing if it's still true. In my case, my belief that that my depression had nothing to do with alcohol, well, that certainly wasn't true. I thought it was true, and I was acting on that basis, but I discovered that it wasn't true. And once that became clear, my behavior was able to change. I didn't have to change it, so to speak, with a hammer actively. It changed. My behavior changed. So if you, for example, are getting the feeling that you don't want to drink as much as you do, however much that might be, or that you're not sure about your relationship with alcohol, or you have a question, right? One thing you can do is examine your beliefs about alcohol, right? You can do a little exercise for yourself. Write down, what do you believe alcohol does to you, for you, with you? How do you feel? And then tell the truth, okay, with your present self. Which of those things are still actually true? And ask yourself, what if they weren't true? Could it be possible? Like, just do the thought experiment with each of those things. Alcohol helps me relax at the end of the day. Well, what if it didn't? Could that be true? What if the net result was that it didn't help you relax over the longer span of time? And since that that question of relaxation comes up so much, that example tends to be very relevant, because we do feel this immediate sense of relaxation, right? Well, that's the depressant, the short-term depressant effect. But in the medium term and the long term, what we tend to find is sleep disruption, more erratic emotional patterns, right? Lack of energy, and a long term, even if it's very slow, but a long term decline, right? In emotional tone, in energy, in lots of things. So is that helping you relax? Because at some point, as you're going down here, you tend to start to get more anxious because things are not going so well, right? And that's where it all comes back. All that relaxation, right, comes back to bite us. So to pause again, what does anybody have an example of like something that your past self believes, but that your future self knows might be bullshit? Something that you're kind of, that you feel that's been part of you, a belief, but that you might have a little question about. I'm looking in the chat here. I'm also looking back a little bit. Yeah. Disconnects. Yeah, I used to think it helps me relax, but I learned it just disconnects. Bradley says, hard to quit when all my friends drink. Yeah, that's a good one. Past self used to think there was no point drinking unless I got drunk. No point in drinking unless I got drunk. Okay, that's an interesting one. I feel like alcohol is part of my family gatherings. Difficult to change the image of myself to my family without their judgment. Fun to feel like it's fun to escape the end of the day. As in, I felt like I could try the ones just explain it, but it really caused, yes, deep numbness. So a couple of people have mentioned this, like the contrast between fun, kind of, let's just say broad terms like fun and enjoyment, and disconnection and numbness. It's a good one, because like both are totally true. I mean, and we want both of those things, actually. I mean, we want to have fun, and we want to disconnect. We even want to, I mean, this is kind of another piece, but like the feeling of being drunk, or of yeah, I mean, it's in a way, it's letting something out that that is true within us. We want, there's some true part to all of these feelings. The thing is that by getting there through this shortcut, we're not actually feeling those, we're not actually doing those things. We're not actually having the fun ourselves, right? We're not actually disconnecting when we really need to disconnect. We're not getting the benefit of real disconnection. We're neither getting the real benefit of, like, what do I mean by getting drunk? What would be the real version of that? Like letting rip, getting in a fight, like a real fight, I don't know, or, shouting, getting angry, running off, kind of acting crazy in some way or another. We're not actually experiencing those things when we're doing it through alcohol. And And it's also true, you know, that with this juxtaposition, I mean, you know, we're having fun, but we're disconnecting. We, you know, you're seeing the truth, right? As we're talking about beliefs and behavior, right? So if you're realizing that it was fun, but now you're seeing the truth that it really caused a deep numbness, I mean, that's a hard thing to admit, and yet also a beautiful thing to admit, to notice, right? And if you allow yourself to feel that, and then ask yourself, well, is, you know, is that what you want, right? Is that what you want to create? Usually when faced with, you know, the actual truth, we're able to, or we make the right choice. And it's not even so much of a choice, it's automatic, right? Our bodies want to do what's good for us automatically. What the body wants is always good for us, but it can be misled. It can be misled. And that, again, that's one thing that alcohol, and again, not just alcohol, that lots of these kind of external additives are very good at doing, is misleading us, masking the truth, right? Kind of taking us down a road that, you know, it can be very interesting, it can be very engaging, but it's not, you know, and it seems real. That's the other thing about what's normal, right? This is something about human nature that has been very powerful for me to realize, is that, you know, the view from inside is how I like to put it. The view from inside always seems real until you just move over and look at it from a different point of view, right? And when your normal changes, you know, then you look back and you're like, oh my God, that's what used to be normal, you know? And now what's normal? Now you're normal, your new inside, your new reality seems just as normal. But when you're inside, especially when your reality, when your normal is being colored or, you know, affected so strongly by some external input, it's very hard to imagine that your normal could be completely different. But that's the reality of change. I think we all know from experience that when you do change, it seems just as normal afterwards. And that brings me to maybe my one of my last points. As I'm just saying, your current self, right? Your ego, to put it in psychological terms, doesn't want to change. That's not your ego's job, right? Your current self doesn't want to change because it feels like giving up part of who you are. And it is. Like, even if that part of who you are is, you know, not feeling so good. That's one of the real catch-22s about depression. Part of you doesn't want to let go even of that. The thing is, yourself will be just as attached to whoever you become in the future. Yourself doesn't really know the difference. Like, yourself only really lives in the present. So a big part of the reason that change often seems like it's going to be so difficult is that it's not your current self's job to become anyone else, right? It's your ego's job to defend who you are right now. So you have to zoom out a little bit. And this is where, like, psychology really does have something to teach us about that can help with change. If there's a change that you'd like to make, don't rely on just your ego to get you there. If you can, again, zoom out a bit, and in particular, start to build a picture of your future self, and perhaps some other parts of yourself as well, that future, right, will begin to pull you forward. And you won't just be depending on, trying to convince your ego to change something about to let go of something about itself, which is, again, it's like it doesn't want to do that. And that's how part of how change can become, again, automatic, essentially an automatic shift towards that future self, as opposed to kind of a battle of willpower, right? That's why it's called willpower. It's a battle against like the will of the ego. Finally, something about intuition. We've talked about that a little bit. I want to leave some time here at the end. So one of the biggest things, or the things I hear most often from people, and this was true certainly with me, is that my intuition was trying to speak up. Okay, your intuition, never lies, and it doesn't, it just like your dreams, like it's not going to waste your time. If you hear something from yourself, however subtle, however vague it might be, pay attention to whatever that little message is. And even if it doesn't make sense right away, make a note of it, write it down in your journal, let it sink in. And if it's a clear message, you would literally, this is what makes people crazy, literally. Ignoring a clear message from yourself will make you crazy. That's what confusion is. That is the state of confusion. When you know something to be true, or you hear a message from yourself, and yet you choose to ignore it. That creates an internal disconnect that can really get you in trouble. So intuition, pay attention. And that's what finally spoke up to me. That's another part of a big part of the reason why intuition is such a big part of my own practice, my personal practice and my coaching practice. And it's amazing, like, to learn how to get more in touch and strengthen your intuition. There's nothing else like it. Yeah, that's but just on that note, there are lots of ways to do that. Just to talk for 30 seconds about kind of two directions, like in terms of cultivating intuition. One is the body, right? One way of thinking about the body is, of intuition, is the body thinking, or what the body wants, or embodied cognition, right? These are all phrases that are used. And the simplest way to cultivate your intuition for many people is simply to get more physical, be in your body more. This is why practices like yoga, etc., are often talked about in this context, but it could be anything. It's like whatever works for you. The mind will learn from the body. Another piece is more internal, and Robert Johnson's book called Inner Work is one example of a great reference point for this, in terms of learning to look at your dreams and your imagination more closely, and to pay attention to what's coming up from your unconscious. Because just like your conscious voice, that's the voice of my consciousness. My intuition is the voice of my unconscious, and we can learn to understand it better. So there are lots of ways to do that. I'd be happy to talk lots more about that, but I want to leave some more time for us here to all talk together at the end. So I will wrap up my comments there. And yeah, I'd just love to open it up. You know, if anybody has anything, any questions, and we'll conclude at the end. Again, we are recording this. We'll share a book list. You'll all get an email from us with my info. And if anybody wants to speak further with me, we'll give you a way to do that. But we're not done yet. So how can I help? What else is on your mind here? What are your thoughts on mocktails, zero alcohol drinks? That's a great question, Rose. First of all, I hate the word mocktail. I mean, what a stupid word. I don't know. It's like, it's, you know, it's coming from the other side. I think, but I mean, I love there's some awesome brewers making really good NA beer now, like craft beer that's non-alcoholic, that's really good. And I love it. You know, I mean, we all drink all the time, right? There's nothing wrong with drinking. So there's nothing wrong with having a drink. Whether you choose to have an alcoholic drink, that's a whole nother matter. So, you know, sometimes I like to have a beer. I choose not to drink alcoholic beer. So what is the word? The characterization or something, I don't know, that like some people are like, oh, I don't want to drink any beer because it'll make me seem like I'm dependent on beer, or it might remind me of beer or something. I don't know. Not a problem for me. I mean, I like beer. So I love NA beer. I don't drink it all the time. And here's the other thing. You're never going to have more than one, you know, because they don't really do anything. So I enjoy my NA beer when I have one. And my favorite is by Surreal Brewing. And they're right in the Bay Area. And it's excellent. Yeah. Yeah, ignoring a clear message from yourself makes you crazy. Literally, it will. Yeah, and Tish mentions hip sobriety. There's a bunch of communities that I have great respect for. And if you go to my website, and we'll share this with you too, but at secondsight.coach, I have a reading list. I have a list of resources and links, including, like a whole bunch of communities and authors that talk about alcohol in the same context that I am, a context of like neuroscience and wellness and self-awareness. And there are some awesome resources out there. What I do is I work, in terms of the work I do, like one-on-one with people. But there are groups that you can work with as well. Yosh says, I like what you said about intuition doesn't lie. Would you say then that the ego is sometimes a liar? So you enjoy just talking to someone else's ego? Uh-oh, it's getting complicated. How can we connect deeply in relationship? Well, yes, maybe. I mean, I'm just making this up, but like the intuition doesn't lie because it can't. Like lying requires consciousness. So yes, the ego can lie. I mean, the ego is the only part of us that can lie, I think. And it can certainly lie to ourselves or anyone else. And the second part, I'm not really sure. Physically addicted is missing from something. Alcohol's place at the same time. It benefits how do I? So you drink the alcohol drinking. Yeah, Jonah. So Yeah, I mean, I make a point of not using, like, I don't talk about addiction from the beginning of most of my conversations because it's so loaded with past baggage. But what addiction is that hijacked habit forming mechanism that I mentioned. It's simply a habit, which is a neurochemical, um, essentially evidence of learning, right? Of repeated behavior, um, exaggerated by an external substance or additive, right? That exaggerates and kind of cements that habit even more strongly. But it's the same mechanism. It's just making it stronger. So that's what addiction is. It's a super strong habit. It doesn't mean that it's like you can't break it. In fact, and this is the thing, is that the way that we used to tend to think about addiction was that like it would be even harder to break. Like you had to get a bigger hammer and like even more willpower, right? What what more and more people believe now, and certainly my experience, was that was not the case at all. Was that once my beliefs, once what I knew to be true, changed, the habit changed of its own accord. And I'm not by any means the only person to experience that. This is a very, this happens to a lot of people. So, so there is a physical, addiction, or again, it varies. But well, there you go. That's what I would say about that. And the rest of what you're saying, I'm not quite sure. What you're exactly what you're saying there. We're kind of close to end of time. So, but yes, being in, well, I don't use the term alcoholic. I don't really agree with that term. So, anyone else have a question here before we wrap up? So again, as we do, I want to thank you all for being here, and you can find me. We'll send this all out, but you can find me at secondsight.coach. You can also find my personal website, bowendwelle.com. And again, on my coaching site, reading list, resources, and of course, my invitation to reach out to me if any of you would like to have a one-on-one conversation. Let's do that. I'd love to speak to you. So thanks again for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe we can, well, I don't know if I can. Thank you. So great to see you all. Thanks. Awesome. Yeah, and here I'll just put in, anyway, there's my email address, just so you have it in the chat. Again, you'll all get an email with all that. And if anybody has anything they want to speak to me directly about right now, feel free to stay on. I can I can stay on for a couple minutes, just in case anybody wants to connect. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. Okay. You got it, Tish. Right on, Jonah. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your participation. Thank you. All right. Here we go. Okay, let me unmute you, Tish. And who's GK? I'm not sure. Noemi, is that? Well, that's all right. Hi, Tish.
Hi. Thank you so much. Thanks for the extra time, and I'm really going to consider um, proceeding with some sessions with you. But here's my question. I have been trying to make. Can you speak a little bit to kind of the coping mechanism of alcohol? I just said goodbye to my mom after 2.5 years of her cancer, and I noticed that that's when I kind of had your realization, like, wow, I'm using this
Mm,
as a crutch, as a in the evenings, it's like it was a way to just, escape the worry, the stress, the sadness. And
mm,
in addition, I've been trying to change my career for a long time. And even though a rewarding career, it doesn't embody what I think I'm supposed to be doing. So there's this
mm,
fatigue that I have felt, and combination of judgment and fatigue, and just um, you know, that whole sense of I've been trying to get somewhere and I can't. So then alcohol's played this role of I'm so exhausted by that.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Thanks for sharing a bit more. Yeah, I mean, what I hear is, you saying is, yeah, similar to maybe to, some of what I was describing is, these things, they go together, right? And they keep, they're both on the ball and kind of keep the ball rolling. And yet the ball is, it's rolling and not in a direction that, it's not rolling doesn't feel good.
Right.
Doesn't feel good.
Right.
And yet, yeah, it's kind of helping you feel, it's kind of helping you cope in the immediate term. And I hear you so kind of overwhelmed with the idea of like, well, I've got it's like I can't change everything at once.
Yes, exactly. But
Yeah.
but I think what you
Yeah.
helped me realize tonight, Bowen, is part of the malaise that I've been carrying around is
Mm-hmm.
this knowledge of my intuition saying, this
Mm,
is not, and if I tried to tell some of my friends I think I've got this issue, they're going to
mm,
say, but you drink the same as me. So there's a lot of, weird, this isn't a glaring
sure.
thing, but I think the malaise is coming from inside me saying,
Mm,
yeah, no, this is more of an issue than you realize. And it's so I really thank you for,
mm,
I've been in many conversations and done lots of personal work, but I think your delivery possibly reached a lot of people on the
mm.
call. So
Thank you. Thank
something
you.
about your candor, and about almost kind of a little bit of this blind spot that we're all getting pinged about.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Well, that knowing the truth at some level, right? And it's not just, not having the strength to admit it, right? Which is kind of the common message is that's not really how it is. It's that maybe it just hasn't, it hasn't been time yet to really know. Um, it's not a matter of like willpower either to know the truth. It's what's true, in the moment is part of it. And yeah, and I mean, here's the other thing about intuition is most of us, right, have, we don't have most of us don't have a very strong sense of intuition.
Hmm.
We haven't cultivated that. And so these messages that, they're trying to get through, they don't come through very strongly. So that's what I mean. It's like, it's not being willing to admit the truth. It's not hearing it.
Right.
It's not our fault because we haven't cultivated that sense. And in yet another catch 22, of course, alcohol numbs all the senses, including the intuition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it it numbs the very thing that is often trying to speak up. So all these pieces are co-involved, right? But that psychic pain is very real. That, you know, and when we have a disconnect or, you know, a gap, and this what Jung called a neurosis, is like a gap between our conscious behavior and what our unconscious needs.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's a gap, we feel it. And we may not know what it is. It may just feel, you know, like dis-ease.
Right. It feels kind of like betrayal sometimes.
Betrayal.
Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet the thing is, like, if we don't know quite what's going on, and we're also in the grip of, you know, a long-standing habit, a pattern that is, again, reinforced through the natural neurochemical processes, well, it can be hard to envision anything different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard to make that mental leap, and rightfully so. And so, you know, I guess the other thing that comes to mind, I mean, along those lines, is we can't change everything at once, you know, but running some experiments, right, with, you know, little, you know, changes, you know, in your life, and really keeping track. And I did this, you know, I kept a journal of my, and I don't just mean experiments with drinking, but that is certainly an experiment that one can do, but, you know, experiments with other things. And I kept track of my sleep quality. I kept track of my emotional state. Like when I, you know, kind of woke up in the morning, I kept track of how much, you know, caffeine I was drinking. So just keeping track of that stuff for a little while, it brought to light, you know, some of the correlations. And again, not so much to like feed the willpower engine, but just to show me the truth of what was going on.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's really, thank you for that extra time, Bowen. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So thanks for joining.
Great to know you're here local too.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tish.
Okay. Thanks for staying on too. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Good luck to you in Brazil.
All right.
Bye-bye.
So.
Thanks again.
Okay. So let's see.